Welcome to Pensar Basketball Live, and today we are going to be talking about why the Toronto Raptors are a sleeping giant in plain sight. A team that has mastered the championship formula through 10 plus years of sustained success under Masai Ujiri. Before we start, congratulations to Team Canada, the soccer team, advancing to the semis. I have not been watching soccer, but I know it's a really big deal. And I was told before this live started, do not start this. All of Canada is watching this penalty shootout. I watched, and I thought it was a perfect segue to what we're going to be talking about, because we're going to be talking about winning, and we're going to be talking about the science and the math of winning, because I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about what it takes to win an NBA championship. I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what it takes to win a championship on any level, in whether it's high school, NHL, MLB. What is it that unites all champions? Well, I decided to dig into the past 22 years of NBA champions, and I decided to look for threads and common elements, because frankly, NBA champions win in all sorts of different ways. We are told that you need a top five player, but then you have the Detroit Pistons win a championship, you have the Boston Celtics win a championship, you have top five players losing in the championship. And so I started to think this is really a team sport. Trends do change, but there are certain things that stay static. And while there are outliers like the 73 win Warriors that very much should have won but did not win, and outliers like the 2011 Mavericks that probably should have never won but managed to win, there is a trend that holds through. And I want to make a case that the Toronto Raptors, wait, wait for it, because I'm about to make my my Bruno Fran Fraschilla moment. The Toronto Raptors are from being one piece away from being 2 years away. So they're two pieces away from being 2 years away. Is that pretty much it? Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about it. So first of all, do I think the Toronto Raptors are going to win a championship next year? Is that why I have put Scotty Barnes next to Kawhi Leonard? No, of course not. But look, this live is a continuation of what we started. I really appreciate the comments, the subscriptions, the support, the super chats, the e-transfers, and everything that has come from the last three, and all of the private DMs from people saying, hey, this is what we want from your channel. We appreciate the rambles. We appreciate the life lessons. We appreciate all the openness and honesty. But the truth is, we come here to learn about basketball. We come here to open our minds to new concepts. And if you can do more of that, it would be great. And I am not one to resist the feedback. Obviously, I try to take feedback as much as I can. And I thought to myself, how do I continue this trend that we continued in the last three, where we talked about agent favors and the math of tanking? And I thought, well, what's the other side of tanking? It's winning championships. So let's talk about the math of winning championships. First of all, this guy, is he a championship number one? Certainly doesn't look like a lot of championship number ones, right? Even though, some people would say he has a lot in common with Magic Johnson and Giannis Antetokounmpo, it certainly doesn't look like it right now. And most NBA fans probably look at the Toronto Raptors and they say, this is a team that is very far away from a championship. And they point to the fact that it is really difficult to go from bad to great. And the Raptors were bad last year. How bad were the Toronto Raptors last year? Well, first of all, in order to understand how bad things are, let's look at the net rating of NBA champions. So this is the first graphic, and you're going to see a lot of graphics and a lot of graphs, and I'll walk you through all of them. And if you want to pause and look back at this later, you can definitely do that. So since the beginning of time, people have been trying to predict champions. We want preseason predictions, and everyone ends up looking stupid. But in the end, how often do we see that the best team in the league ends up winning a championship? Well, not always, right? It's not always the case, right? We had the Spurs in 2005. They were the best team in terms of net rating. They won. The Spurs in 2007, the Celtics in 2008. These teams, they're rare. The Spurs in 2014 again, so kind of points to how great the San Antonio Spurs were in terms of their team balance. Then once again, the Warriors in 2015. That was that first championship with Clay and Steph and Draymond. Then you had the Warriors in 2017, and then you had the Boston Celtics. But then before that, you had a whole bunch of teams that weren't top two, sometimes top three in that rating. The Nuggets were an outlier. They were sixth. There was another outlier that was the Mavericks in 2011 that I have forementioned. They were eighth, right? You had the Heat with Shaquille O'Neal and Dwayne Wade in 2006. They weren't top five. So, but the general rule still applies. All of these teams were top 10 in net rating, right? And when we look at averages, that's when people start to make their mind. So the average net rating of an NBA champion is third place. Really, it's 3.27th out of 30 teams in the NBA. So on average, NBA champions are 3 out of 30. So, and they're in their 90th percentile in terms of net rating. So the outliers, as I mentioned, they do exist. The Nuggets, sixth, right? And it doesn't really matter completely to me how you formulate your net rating. You could be the best defense in NBA history and a pretty mediocre offensive team. You could also be the greatest offensive team and pretty okay defensively. It doesn't matter how you do it. What matters is, well, there's the old adage, there's some old heads who'd be like, oh, defense travels on the road, etc. But actually, there's a lot of fascinating research to suggest that the home court advantage is kind of going away in the NBA as well. So, what matters really is how do the five people on the court score more points than the other five people on the court? I hate to break it down to something that simple, but really, regardless of how you want to slice it, you need the Michael Jordan, you need the Kobe Bryant, you need the Shaquille O'Neal. None of this is true. You just need to score more points than your opponent. This really breaks down to math. And the truth is that the math does not look great for the Toronto Raptors. So last year, the Toronto Raptors were 24th in offensive rating, 25th in defensive rating, and 25th in net rating. And by the way, you are correct. These things got worse after trading Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. So a lot of prognosticators are saying, yeah, you missed Scotty Barnes. Yeah, you missed Jakob Poeltl. But man, there's a really, really good chance that you could be one of the worst five teams in the NBA next year, and no one would be surprised. I don't think anyone would bat an eye if the Raptors finish bottom five in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes next year, because there isn't exactly a ton of evidence here to suggest that they were ever any good last year, especially after they made those big trades. And obviously, people really value what they think the Raptors gave up because Pascal Siakam just got $45 million from a very smart executive, and OG Anunoby just got 43 from another pretty smart executive and one of the title favorites. So those two teams are good teams. They paid the guys you lost 45 million. We're all up in arms about the guy that we got back getting 35 million. So clearly the Raptors got worse, right? The Raptors must have gotten worse. And let's be honest, it's not like they were championship contenders with those guys. The year before, they were 11th in offensive rating, 12th in defensive rating, and 12th in net rating. That's probably why the Raptors are such a flop. Can you imagine losing in the play in with those analytics? Shit happens. I'm pretty sure if the Raptors played a 7 game series against Chicago Bulls, they beat the Chicago Bulls. But that's also why 7 game series exists. It's to eliminate outliers like a 1 game fluke. The Raptors missed so many free throws. The Raptors were a pretty good team. I know people don't want to admit it, but 41-41, they were a pretty good team. They massively underperformed. Look at the guys who got paid off that team. There's a reason they decided to put Jakob Poeltl into that core because they believed that they had a 50-win team that won 41 games. Because the previous year, they had won 48 games without Jakob Poeltl, with Kem Birch and Thaddeus Young and Gary Trent Jr. So, with Jakob Poeltl, with a year older Scotty Barnes, did the Raptors perhaps have a false start? I think they did. But now they have pivoted, and they have pivoted away, and they are now the 25th net rated team last year. And there is a very good chance that they could be just as bad. The Toronto Raptors, when they won a championship, 2018, 2019, they were fifth in offensive rating, fifth in defensive rating, and third in net rating. And what do we say the average net rating was for the NBA champions? 3 out of 30. That's exactly where the Raptors were when they won the championship. So when we look at outliers, we don't look at outliers. It doesn't matter. The point is, at some point, you have to become one of those top 6 teams in the NBA. And the Raptors, for their part right now, are really far away. And a lot of people are really upset with Masai Ujiri. Now, I've been critical of Masai Ujiri. People call me a Masai apologist for years. People say I don't give him enough flack. I want to show you why I don't give him enough flack. And maybe you'll see why I don't give him enough flack. This is Masai Ujiri's track record with the Toronto Raptors. Okay. Yes. This is Masai Ujiri's track record with the Raptors. That means, hang on, I'm missing a slide. Give me 1 second. This isn't going to get clunky. 1 sec. Internet. As I was uploading these, I think there was a hang on one sec. I'm gonna find it. It was okay. You know what? I memorized it. It doesn't matter. Masai Ujiri under Masai Ujiri since 2014, 2015, 2013, 2014 until present date, which includes two lottery seasons, which is Tampa Tank and last year's Tank without a draft pick tank, in which you had crazy season, Jonte Porter. I don't need to go through the entire list of all the crap that happened last year for the Toronto Raptors. Those are the two seasons in which you have not been a successful organization. Okay. Masai Ujiri, under Masai Ujiri, the Toronto Raptors have won 47.8. Now, it's important to realize where you come from sometimes to understand where you're going. This is the Toronto Raptors since 2003. You know what's interesting? The Toronto Raptors, in their history, their best season prior to Masai Ujiri was 47 wins. So they had 47 wins under Brian Colangelo's first year in 2006, 2007, which is that big spike you see pre Masai Ujiri. And they had another good year, 2000, 2001, which is the year that they went to the Eastern Conference semifinals against Allen Iverson Sixers and lost in game 7. And that was another 47 wins. You know what's interesting? The Toronto Raptors' average year under Masai Ujiri has been better than their best year. I want you to really think about that. That's 11 years. The Raptors' average for 11 years has been better under Masai Ujiri than their single best season the year before. To put this into context, because I realize numbers can be really weird and I'm not trying to dumb it down for anybody, but please just understand this is what I'm saying. I want you to imagine that in your life, you got this is your salary 50,000, 50,000, 60,000, 50,000, 60,000, 50,000, 60,000, 100,000, 80,000. I want you to imagine that that's your entire like life. And then you get this job. And then for 11 years straight, you average over $100,000 a year. Like that's it's madness. The success that the Raptors have enjoyed under Masai Ujiri. We have a recency bias. We can forget things. And there is a sense of Masai Ujiri's lost his swagger. He's lost his way. And I think that there has been elements of that because there have been underperformances. But let's not forget 2 years ago, they asked the Celtics to tear apart Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. It doesn't work. Let's not forget that last year, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, we were told that Kyrie Irving was washed and he was never going to be, a playoff guy. He was never going to be reliable. Let's not forget that the Toronto Raptors were criticized for years for not tearing it down. Years. Why aren't you tearing it down? Why aren't you rebuilding? Why aren't you rebuilding? DeMar DeRozan's cooked. Kyle Lowry's overrated. He's not clutch. He's a playoff choker. Jonas Valanciunas is too slow, and then boom, you win one. Maybe there's something here that we need to explore. Excellence breeds excellence, maybe. And I just found the I just found the graphics that I was that I was looking for. And I think this is what it comes down to. So I wanted to look at the 3 years before an NBA team won a championship to see how many wins they averaged. And what I found was pretty shocking. That while there were some exceptions, the rule pretty much stuck. You had to be good for a while and take a lot of lumps and a lot of criticism and a lot of disappointment before you get to be great. And so, to anyone asking for a team to bottom out and be really, really bad for a really long time, and you're not a free agent destination, you're aiming to lose because that formula doesn't work. Take a look. This is the average number of games that a team won for a trailing 3-year average, which means to say that before the Spurs won in 2003, they averaged 56 wins a year for 3 straight years. Before the Spurs won in 2014, they averaged 60 wins a year and lost every year, by the way. There are some exceptions. And let's talk about those exceptions because they are not really disproving the rule. The average NBA champion wins 50.45 games per season in the 3 years prior to winning a championship. There are certainly outliers. The 2008 Celtics. What happened there? Well, for starters, Kevin McHale decided to do his old buddy a favor and traded away Kevin Garnett for not very much. And they got very lucky in the draft. And they decided to trade Jeff Green for Ray Allen. So it required 2 organizations basically gifting you all NBA caliber players, and those players buying in, and Doc Rivers coaching the hell out of that team, the only credit I'll ever give him as a coach. And that's what happened there. The 2016 Cavs. Well, what happened 2 years prior to that? The reason that average is so low is because LeBron James decided to come back to Cleveland after being in Miami. The 2020 Lakers, another LeBron James type of thing, right? LeBron James goes to Los Angeles. 2006 Heat, Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade ascending from 2003 to 2006, making that team better, and then Shaquille O'Neal being the penciling piece. They didn't just go from terrible to great and win a championship. They replaced Caron Butler, Lamar Odom, and that core with Shaquille O'Neal and shrunk their window. If you remove those 4 teams, the average goes up to 53.5. You know what that tells me? That tells me the Raptors lost very little before they won. The Raptors average 55 games, 55 wins in the 3 years. That's with DeMar DeRozan. That's with guys like DeLon Wright, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam. That's those guys. Marc Gasol wasn't here. Kawhi Leonard wasn't here. They averaged 55 wins. And here's the crazy part. The Raptors won more games, or on track to win more games, the year after Kawhi left. So Kawhi wasn't the only thing. Kawhi wasn't the championship. He was the cherry on top. He was a major part. He was a closer. But Kawhi Leonard was not the same player defensively. He was probably a massive incentive boost for the Raptors to get that championship, the desperation, the fear factor of losing him. We only have 1 year to do this. Maybe that was it. But Kawhi Leonard gets a lot of credit for something that the team did. But we're not going to dismiss individual greatness here. We're definitely not, because it is real. It absolutely does exist. Okay. And so we need to talk about how are NBA champions really constructed? Well, conventional wisdom used to say you need a big 2. You need the Malone and Stockton. You need the Kemp and Gary Payton. Wow. You need the Jordan and Pippen. You need the Kareem and Magic. You need the Penny and Shaq. You need the Kobe and Shaq. The dynamic duos that ruled. And then, to some extent, the San Antonio Spurs had these 3 guys. One of them is very underrated because he was definitively the second best shooting guard through most of his prime, if not the third best shooting guard in the league during his prime, and that's Manu Ginobili. Ginobili and Duncan and Parker, this sort of team dynamic. Do you remember earlier when I was showing you like team net ratings? I don't think people realize how goddamn dominant that Spurs trio was, because they were great and everything around them was great. And then a team like Detroit wins, and they don't have a dynamic duo. They have this very defensively oriented starting 5 with a couple of scorers and a lot of defenders and some role players. And people start to wonder, is the tide shifting? And then, of course, you get the big 3 era. You get KG, big ticket going to Boston. You get the Heatles, and then you get Draymond, Clay, and Steph. And then eventually you get Steph, Draymond, Clay, and Durant. And then eventually you get the Boston Celtics starting five. And so I think it's a misinterpretation to say it's a top two. Oh, it has to be IQ and Scotty. They have to get way, way better. Or, it's going to come down to whether Scotty's as good as Michael Jordan. Cheat sheet. He's not as good as Michael Jordan. And if you're banking on that outcome, you're probably going to be wrong. Notice I said probably. Not trying to hate on Scotty Barnes, but that's a big hill to climb. No, what you need is a team. And it doesn't matter how you aggregate those parts. I'll give you a hypothetical. If you construct a team as follows: the 20th best player in the league, the 19th best player in the league, the 18th best player in the league, the 17th best player in the league, and the 15th best player in the league. And you face off against the 3rd, 4th, 50th, 80th, and 150th best player in the league. If those are your two starting lineups, I am betting from now on, with the way the NBA has gone, the way the game is played, that the team with the 5 top 20 players is going to win every time. It's no longer okay in the NBA. It's too talented. It's no longer okay to have one guy and nothing else. It's not okay to have two guys and nothing else. Because in a league that is suddenly defined by your weakest link, it helps when you don't have weak links. We are trending towards the Celtics becoming the norm, because that's how ridiculously talented. Because at the end of the day, what it comes down to is advantage generation. That's all it is. Basketball is a game of advantage generation, space generation. And if you want to generate advantages, your guy on the court needs to be able to beat his guy to the advantage. Can't create an advantage against a player who's better than me on a routine basis. So at some point, it's going to overwhelm. And at some point, having a weak link or two weak links, or having a roster that is depleted of depth. Because I tell you, if the big three model worked historically, it has worked. But if it worked today, I'd feel a lot more bullish about the Phoenix Suns championship odds next year. I would have felt much more bullish about the LA Clippers odds. So why is it the LA Clippers did not ever get to an NBA Finals, despite having Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in their peak, in their prime? Why is it that the Toronto Raptors were able to do so much more with Kawhi Leonard? They won 4 rounds of basketball with Kawhi Leonard in 1 year. The Clippers managed to win 3 rounds in 5 years. That's less than a round per year. Why were the Clippers unsuccessful with Kawhi Leonard? Is it as simple as he was worse? Nope. Kawhi Leonard had a better year for the Clippers after he left. So for his first year with the Clippers was better than his year with the Raptors. I promise you, there's no statistic that will tell you that. What was it? I think it's pretty simple. The LA Clippers did not have the continuity to maximize Kawhi's prime. Oh, here comes Harden. Oh, here comes Paul George. Oh, we're going to mesh this new core together. We're going to find a completely different way to play basketball. We're going to have new players coming in and out of the rotation. Nick Batum's in, Nick Batum goes. Nick Batum's back. I think they had the Morris twin. Norman Powell comes. It's a flux. You don't have an existing core. You know who could have won an NBA championship that year with Kawhi Leonard? A lot of teams, but not the Clippers. They had to start from scratch. They had to reestablish culture. That whole thing that I told you all about continuity, they sent that out the door. Patrick Beverley, Russell Westbrook. Sorry, not Russell Westbrook. Patrick Beverley, Danilo Gallinari, I believe. Who else was there? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. All those guys. The biggest disaster, and probably why the Clippers couldn't win with Kawhi, is because they traded everything that was right about that organization for Paul George. Because they bought themselves into this model that you need 2, you need 3. And the truth is, you need 5. Ironically, you had 2. You had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander right there. He might have grown with Kawhi. What would Shea Gilgeous-Alexander have looked like on the Clippers last year? They bought into the hype. And frankly, almost every single team that has gutted their roster to trade for one guy, whether that is the Knicks trading away all those pieces for Carmelo Anthony. Did it work? No. You traded away everything that worked. What if the Raptors had done the same thing? What if the Raptors had decided, no, we need to pair DeMar DeRozan and Kawhi Leonard? What if they had traded away Kyle Lowry and Norman Powell and Pascal Siakam to get Kawhi Leonard so that they could have this big two, this conventional starting, oh, you're Jordan and Pippen, your big two wings? They would have lost. They would have lost. The championship formula is simple. You need three things, in my opinion, to win a championship. You need scars. I've talked about this many times. You need to go to the dance and lose several times. What happened with the Boston Celtics, where they were able to do it it is such an outlier. It does not happen. It rarely ever, if ever, happens. And the only reason it even remotely happened is because those three were just that damn experienced and that damn good. And there was already this sort of established route. They didn't just all show up there. It wasn't quite like the Phoenix Suns, where almost everyone is new. And then you send out these things that work, like Cameron Johnson and Mikal Bridges. I mean, I'm not even suggesting necessarily that the Phoenix Suns should have kept their core around Devin Booker, but you shipped out everything for Kevin Durant. You shipped out everything. It wasn't like the Golden State Warriors who just brought Durant into a winning situation. What if the Golden State Warriors had traded away Clay and Draymond for Kevin Durant? Do you think they would have done it? Sure, maybe. But would they have been successful? Would they have been successful? They would have certainly gotten more talented, but would they have been successful? Because Klay Thompson and Draymond Green are a fabric of what makes that team work. Why do I think the Toronto Raptors are a sleeping giant? So far, this just feels like 27 minutes of clickbait. I'm just talking about what makes an NBA champion. Well, take a look at this. This is the top 3 star players. Warp. I considered making it 5, but I realized NBA teams weren't really built with 5 in mind. And so I decided to say, let's talk about 3. Let's not talk about 2. Let's talk about 3. The highest rated top 3s in the NBA are many years ago. That number is slowly coming down. It sort of peaked 2013, 2018. Those are the peaks. But the last few years, that number has been trending down. We've had 2 teams, the Milwaukee Bucks and the Golden State Warriors, in 2021 and 2022 win championships where the top 3 were under 10.2. That is a far cry from the Heat in 2013 with their 15.8 and the Warriors with their 15.4, right? So what we're seeing is far less disparity between the 5th best player in the starting lineup and the best player in the starting lineup. We're seeing a lot less concentration in the value coming from your top 2 or 3 guys, and we're seeing more of a balance in terms of your top 5 guys, 6 guys, 7 guys. In fact, the Toronto Raptors are building and have built, frankly, for years in the model of the Spurs. And the San Antonio Spurs, Tim Duncan, are the official model for the current NBA. Every team that is successful is ripping them off, frankly. And that team started with 3, 4, 5, if you think about it, like really great players. You can always credit one guy, Duncan, but you have to go down that roster and you have to see how dominant it was. You have to look at their bench. The average championship Big 3 VORP was 12.15. Outliers included teams like the Heat and the Warriors, the 07 Spurs, right? The 08 Celtics. But on the other hand, you had the 19 Raptors. They were under 10. The 2020 Warriors, 2022 Warriors with Andrew Wiggins, in the starting lineup, they had an 8. And then the Mavericks, and they were 9.7. They were the only teams under 10. So for context, the Toronto Raptors in 2023-2024 squad was 5.1. Another explanation for lower VoIP ratings can be injuries, lower minutes for aging rosters is not exact science, just an interesting benchmark for your top 3 players to clip 9. But I would say it is a much more interesting benchmark for your top 5 players to collectively not have as much of a disparity as we see with certain rosters. Rosters like the Clippers, rosters like the Suns. The way these rosters have been built and constructed, we're seeing them fail over and over. The teams that have been successful are the teams who have fewer holes, the teams who have fewer weaknesses. So I look at the Toronto Raptors and I see a real, legitimate starting guard in Emmanuel Quickly. He's legit. I see another one in RJ Barrett. He's legit. I see a legit starting center in Jakob Poeltl. He is legit. He would start on a lot of teams, maybe not all teams, obviously, but he would start on quite a few teams. He would get rotation minutes on every single team in the league. So Jakob Poeltl is a guy. This I think the OKC Thunder were debating between him and Isaiah Hartenstein. He's a guy. He's a pretty good player. We talk a lot of shit about what you gave up to get him, but you gave it up for a reason. He's a good player. He's maybe earning a little bit too much at 20 million, but he's at least an 18 million, 17 million center who doesn't shoot. He's a really good player. He's a good player in 25-minute spurts. And then you have Scotty Barnes. Is Scotty Barnes a conventional superstar that you build around? Is he the Michael Jordan? Is he the LeBron James? Not yet. And he has not flashed anything that suggests that he will be LeBron or Michael. But can he be at least as good as some of the guys that we've seen win championships? Like Giannis and Tatum? Can he be that guy? We'll see. But certainly, I think that relative to how deep and good this roster can be and how many good habits they're building, I want to talk a little bit fewer numbers. And right now, I want to talk more philosophy, the philosophy of championships, the understanding of what it takes to build something up. Because what I'm witnessing over the last year, exactly 1 year actually. So since the departure of Fred VanVleet in free agency last year, since the slow, departure of Nick Nurse, what I'm seeing is a shift in culture. Do you know that all those teams that were repeat successful maintained culture throughout their repeat succession? Dwayne Wade, Pat Riley, eventually Eric Spoelstra, that became like a staple, you know? But at least Dwayne Wade and Pat Riley were constants through. And then Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, Jimmy Butler, you see how teams are successful in different iterations. They always talk about Heat culture, Spurs culture. You know how those teams keep bouncing back, right? It's kind of interesting. The Heat went to the NBA Finals and won a championship with Shaq and a very young Dwayne Wade. A few years later, they did it with Shaq. Sorry, they did it without Shaq. Shaq was gone. They did it with D Wade, Chris Bosh, LeBron James twice. Then some years passed, and then they found themselves back with Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero, and they went to 2 finals. How did this happen? How does such different teams? Bam Adebayo wasn't in the NBA the last time the Heat were there, but suddenly he's there again. Jimmy Butler wasn't on the Heat back then. He was on the Bulls. But why is he part of this? What's the constant? The constant is culture. The constant is a way we do things. A constant is your leadership, your organizational stability. And also, a constant is the standard that you set as an organization. I had a really deep talk with one of my best friends who's here from Serbia right now about standards today. We talked about deserving things. We talked about the standards we set. We, whether we realize it or not, are constantly changing and informing people on the standards. When we walk out in public and we dress a certain way, we talk a certain way, we carry ourselves a certain way, we are exhibiting our standards, and our standards are showing people how we will be treated. When you go to a building in which there is urine in the elevators, that is also a standard. That is an upkeep. And you will feel a certain way when you walk into that building, and you will contribute a certain way in that community because that is the truth. The truth is, when you implement a culture of winning And it sounds stupid and it sounds floofy, but tell me how the Spurs keep showing up over and over and over and over. Tell me why they keep winning. Tell me why almost 2.5 decades since they drafted Tim Duncan, they continue to win. You will point to luck because that is the easy answer. You will say, oh, they got lucky with David Robinson. They got lucky with Tim Duncan. They got lucky with, you know, Victor Wembanyama. Well, I don't know. Did the Detroit Pistons get lucky with Cade Cunningham? Organizational stability sets the standard. I see these three young kids that have walked into the Toronto Raptors organization. Actually, it's four young kids now, but one not so young, but three young kids. We'll talk about them. I see a young kid who walked into the Toronto Raptors from the Kansas Jayhawks last year, it's Grady Dick. I saw him struggle in a way very few rookies have ever struggled in Raptors history. I saw him basically being one of the worst players in the league. I saw him struggle to basically hold his own in the G League. I've seen better prospects than him shatter for much less, and I saw him bounce back, and I didn't expect it. I held out hope. I supported him, but I didn't know that he could do it. I kept saying, I think he'll do it. I think he'll do it. But I didn't know he could do it because I had seen so many times over the last couple of years under Nick Nurse that Raptors prospects would start falling and they'd keep falling and they just keep falling and falling. That's what happened with Scotty Barnes in year two. The momentum and the quicksand just got him. I think it's great that Masai Ujiri, albeit a little bit of a delayed reaction, a little bit of a delay to acceptance of reality. But I think it's great that you have people like Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster and Dan Tolzman and Teresa and all these people who basically exude winning culture that can look at a team and say, this is not us. This is not us. This is not our standard. This is not how we do things. I'm glad that they caught themselves because right now, what they have done, in my opinion, is they have built it all back. It doesn't look obvious right now. I tell you, there was a time when Steph Curry was so injury prone that Monta Ellis was the obvious choice. They made a tough decision. That was before four championships. There was a time when the Warriors seriously debated, just before all the hoopla now, that they should trade Klay Thompson for Kevin Love. That was obvious to them. Big man. You got to trade for a big man. This is a small guy. This is a big man. Come on. You got to trade for Kevin Love. And Jerry West basically threatened to quit if they did it. There was a time when trading Kobe Bryant, trading Vlade Divac, a championship center, for a 17-year-old Kobe Bryant was considered blasphemous, insane. You don't do this. Vlade Divac, one of the top 10 centers in the league. You don't do this. You can't do this right now. Jerry West did it anyway. There was a time when they thought that Kobe was being given too much because they traded away one of the 3, 4 best shooting guards in the league. People don't want to remember how good Eddie Jones was for the Lakers and how good Nick Van Exel was. They traded those guys away to make room for Kobe. And that is not a cap. That's not cap. They saw the vision. They saw. These were unpopular choices at the time. Kyle Lowry is a championship. Kyle Lowry is a championship point guard. Who thought that was going to happen? Not the Memphis Grizzlies who gave up on him, not the Houston Rockets who gave him up for a first round pick and thought he was a malcontent who would never win anything. It's difficult to see winning before winning happens. It's difficult to see the emerging pieces of winning. But I know one thing from being around winning organizations my whole life and being around a lot of dysfunctional and losing organizations. I've been around winning boards, winning companies, losing boards, losing companies. I know how losers think. I know how winners think. I know that culture predates any winning or losing that you will do. If you have a losing culture, you can put every winner in the world in a losing culture. They will leave, they will sour, they will be malcontent, they will never win because seeds do not grow in bad soil. There are certain people who believe, for whatever reason, that they can just build a house anywhere. So they try laying bricks on the mud, and time again, regardless of how many different bricks and how many different variations they put, they somehow find a way to sink the bricks into the ground. And they say, I've tried every which way. I tried every which way to put these bricks in this order and that order, and they don't work. I tried trading for 5 max players. I tried trading for 2 max players. I tried trading away every draft pick I ever owned. I brought in Kevin Durant, and he didn't win me a championship. I tr I spent everything for Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They didn't win me a championship. I tanked for 5 years, no championship. And like I would say to the person who tried to build a house on mud, I would ask them, "Did you ever bother to lay the foundation? Did you ever bother to take that time to build up the structures that no one will ever see, so that the structures that people will see can be on stable ground?" They didn't. The Toronto Raptors took last year to lay a foundation. They shifted a culture, and all people can see is 25th ranked net rating. I told y'all for years that Scotty Barnes would be really, really great, and nobody believed me. Well, I don't say nobody believed me. I'm just capping now. I'm sorry. I don't want to lie. Some people believe me. A lot of people in this channel believe me. But people, when you walked into an NBA circle or a debate show or whatever, and you tried to present that Scotty Barnes was better than Cade Cunningham, people thought you were stupid. I tried to say it before the draft. I tried to say it at the draft. Scotty's better than Jalen Suggs. Scotty's better than this guy. Scotty's better than Jalen Green. People are like, you're stupid. You're crazy. Why? Because I see what he is. You know what he is? He's a culture builder. That dude is like an extension of Masai Ujiri. Why do you think they gave him $225 million? It's not just because of basketball. It's because of who he is. I remember saying, and this is a quote, and some of you in this channel will remember me saying this because I said it multiple times. I said that I believe that if Scotty Barnes had been drafted to the Detroit Pistons, that Scotty Barnes would be in jail because Scotty Barnes probably would have taken a chair and hurled it at somebody if he was around so much dysfunction and so much losing. Scotty Barnes hates losing. You understand? I've said it again and again and again. This guy hates losing. He'll do everything to win. If you need him to play center, he'll do that. You need him to play small forward, he'll do that. You need him to be on time, he'll do that. You need him to be 2 hours early, he'll do that. You need him to be up at 2 a.m., 1 a.m. You have no idea how hard this guy worked during that second year. He was grinding himself into the ground because he was so upset that his team was losing. Very few Raptors, in my recollection, hated losing more than more than Kyle Lowry. It was something that just intimately, it just bothered him being around losing habits, losing cultures. And so he would butt heads. He had personality. He didn't trust people. This is all the stuff we heard. He's difficult. He's difficult. No, he's not difficult. He's not difficult. He was always a good guy. You hear all the stuff about him in Villanova. He was not toxic or anything. He butt heads with people who were idiots. He butt heads with people who had losing habits. He couldn't stand teammates doing this. Jimmy Butler, same thing. He was a malcontent. He was a malcontent in Philly. He was a malcontent in Minnesota. You know? So they got all this stuff about Scotty Barnes being a malcontent second year. Oh, bad body language. Fuck you. Bad body language. Yeah, he had bad body language. Look at the culture he was around. Look at what was happening around him. If you care about winning, you stand up to losing. And that's why I believe the Raptors will win. Does it sound stupid to say this? That you will win because you have someone who hates losing this much as a vital part of your organization, giving the marching orders. They have rebuilt this culture in such a beautiful way. You know, I have such a you watch my draft coverage. I did not walk in like some big Jacoby Walter fan. He was 16th on my board, but I'm high on his odds of success because in the end, he has come into an organization in which accountability is the norm. Selflessness is the norm. And these things, weirdly enough, they breed very good basketball habits and ultimately success. The San Antonio Spurs and the Golden State Warriors are, in fact, the model. But the Raptors are a model too. The Toronto Raptors, with Masai Ujiri, have been one of the most successful sports teams in North America for the last 11 years. I think people boil it down to one single championship because that's what they remember. But as a person who sat there and watched this team get to the conference finals, get to the first round and lose, come back, refresh, retool, get back, refresh, retool. I think that it took a really long time to build that culture. Well, you lost the culture. Congratulations. You got it back. And you know what? I think this time they're going to build it even better. I think they're going to build it better because I think Scotty is an easier player to build around than anyone else you had. He is younger and you got him earlier. Everything comes down to age. It's one thing to get Jonas Valanciunas into your development staff and not waste those years with Triano or whatever. It's easy to get him at 24, but it's easier to develop him as a winning player at 21. You got Scotty Barnes at 19. You got DeMar DeRozan much later. You got Kyle Lowry wasn't even a Raptor until he was 26. Masai Ujiri didn't show up until he was damn near 30. Well, that's not true. He was like 28. No, no, no. What if Kyle Lowry had been developed under a Masai Ujiri team in a winning culture? Could he have been better? Could he have been better sooner? That's the thing. The only regrettable thing about the Toronto Raptors' last championship is that they won it at the end of their window. What if this time they win it at the beginning of the new window? I believe the Toronto Raptors are 2 pieces away from being 2 years away from winning a championship. Why do I say this, and why am I such a proponent for them not tanking next year? I gave you all the evidence in the last live for why the Raptors shouldn't tank. I gave you all the reasons why draft picks are not the be all end all. I told you the new odds do not allow for this to be a tenable solution. This is not the way to win championships. The way to win championships is to draft well and then start winning. You must develop the culture. I think the Raptors developed the culture, and I'll reiterate my point from the previous live. I do believe that if the time comes that it's Cooper Flag time, they will fully pivot and they will explain it later. And there's nobody on their roster, by the way, a sort of hidden benefit of signing Scotty and signing IQ and having RJ on lock is there are no core pieces who are in contract years. None. Believe me, you may not be able to ask an NBA champion like Fred VanVleet to tank, but you can ask Davion Mitchell and Sasha Vezenkov to tank, no problem. So the Raptors have set themselves up beautifully. Aim for the playoffs, pivot to the lottery. This is the way it's going to be. I can tell you how the season's going to go. Pretty much, it's going to come down to how good Scotty, IQ, RJ, Jakob. It's going to come down to that. It's also going to come down to whether or not they complete this Cameron Johnson trade. If they get Cameron Johnson, go watch Cameron Johnson play and tell me he is not amazing. They can make this work because that top 5 competes. That top 5 has very few weaknesses, in my opinion. And yeah, RJ Barrett's a defensive liability. And yeah, Jakob Poeltl still can't shoot. But again, find me a perfect team. There's no perfect teams. Al Horford's old. Kristaps Porzingis has issues. Jason Tatum has issues. Jalen Brown is turnover prone. Yeah, there's no perfect basketball team here. But to get this team this young, this good would be incredible. To have only 2 guys above the age of 25 on that core would be pretty great. And I think the Raptors can start building. And once you start building, you keep the tenets of your culture and then you start swapping. You swap out little pieces here and there. Maybe that means eventually Grady Dick is going to go for a center. Or maybe that means that Jacoby Walter is going to go for a power forward. Or maybe that means that Emmanuel Quickly plus 2 of those guys are going to go for the best point guard in the league at some point. It doesn't really matter. The point is you keep your culture, you build stability, you build those scars, and you slowly climb, climb, climb. It's not going to happen overnight. Next year, the Raptors, best case scenario, 16th in net rating might be the best case scenario. But the year after, you get to ninth. Get to ninth. The year after that, fifth. Boom. Championship window open. And guess what? Scotty Barnes 25. If that championship window opens when he's 25, consider this entire process a success because you have him under contract for 3 more years and you've already achieved what most of his draft peers will not have achieved at that point. That's important. You got to bring the culture back, and you did. I think Darko Rajalkovic is the truth, man. I really do. I'm not preaching. Y'all know me. I'm not these other channels. I'm not trying to hype you up about the Toronto Raptors. I'm not trying to tell you what you want to hear about the Toronto Raptors. I'm trying to tell you that culture is real, that winning happens based on culture, based on pieces. Yes, you can point to the current roster deficiencies. I promise you, if you looked at that team, Kyle, DeMar, Gravis Vasquez, Patrick Patterson, that team that initially launched We the North, I promise you this, they did not look like a team that was going to the playoffs. They looked like a team that was going to be the worst team in the league. Okay. Chemistry, communication, accountability, development, familiarity, over time, defense, plugging in holes, development, guys enjoying coming to work. I'm currently embroiled amidst a condo board feud, and it's very toxic. Listening to these people, being around them is honestly draining. Can you imagine coming to work when everything is up balance? You don't know about your next contract. You don't know if your coach is going to start you or complete you. You realize what a huge thing Darko's communication is? Do you realize, like, last year we had so much stuff happen and then nothing happened? You know how little it took to fray this locker room the previous year under championship head coach Nick Nurse? I put that in air quotes, championship head coach, because he inherited championship culture. You didn't have to build it. You didn't have to build it. Now you go and build it. Build it in Philly. Go build it with Joel Embiid. Build championship habits, championship culture, championship accountability. It's not a fluke. Winning is never a fluke. I promise you this. I'm not trying to be dramatic when I say this. Winning is never a fluke. None of these teams, it was not a fluke. There was sacrifice, there was depth, there were role players, there were buy-in, there were guys who took fewer shots. That starts with culture. But you know where culture starts? Starts with leadership. Starts with your head coach. Starts with your leader. Scotty Barnes has figured out things at 22 that I don't think most NBA superstars figured out until they're 28. That will help him. And that will help the Toronto Raptors. I don't think Scotty Barnes has to score 30 points for the Raptors to be really good. I think he just needs to be more into himself. I think he needs to grow into himself. I think that he needs to be more of a vocal leader. I think that the fact that he cares about defense, even if you can criticize that he's not the greatest point of attack defender, maybe he's a little, slow-footed in certain matchups, fine. This dude cares about defense. He's not going to stop caring about defense because he literally cared about defense since he was in grade 6. It's just his identity is who he is. Selflessness, defense. Guess what wins championships? Selflessness and defense. This is why the Toronto Raptors are so high on Scotty Barnes. And honestly, the Raptors are much higher on Scotty Barnes than the media will ever be on Scotty Barnes until he eventually wins one. And then they'll be like, oh, I didn't know this type of player can win a championship as the number one. And then they'll figure it out. When Brian and I discuss Scotty Barnes comparisons, we always shut it down, right? Because it's always like, you don't know who to compare him to. His coach compared him to Nikola Jokic. His previous coach compared him to Scottie Pippen and Magic Johnson. Last I checked, all of those guys are NBA champions. Scotty Barnes is a championship player. I will bet this channel that before he retires, he has at least one. I hope for the Raptors' sake, he will have at least 3. Okay, 119 comments. Let's get to it. 3 super chats. Holy shit. Whoa. Okay, the homie nicked. Masai has been great steward of the team. Overall, he has been extraordinarily patient and loyal during his tenure. I prefer that he err by being too much that way than being the opposite. Nobody is perfect. That is a super balanced perspective. Thank you very much. And I believe this is not your first super chat. You have super chatted before. Appreciate it. And I believe you left a super sticker once as well. So thank you so much, the homie nicked. Noble Venom, unrelated, but let's effing go Canada. I agree. I'm really getting into Canada team sports. I have never really been that way. I think it's because I'm a dual citizen and I sometimes feel like I'm betraying America by rooting for Canada, but I've been here so long that I just feel like very adopted by the land. And it wasn't until like last year that someone asked me, like, are you ever going to go back to the States? And I said, yeah, to visit maybe, but I don't think I'm ever going to live there. I think this is it for me. So yeah, I'm gonna retire in Canada in 30 years. So yeah, let's effing go Canada. I'm on board. Thank you for the great content. William Seal, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. S. Antonio, the talent in next year's draft is unreal. Yep, the talent is unreal. And I'll tell you, Colin Murray Boyles could be the best, the fourth best player in that draft. And he might go 13th. And you might get him, right? What I'm sure about, and this is what I'm sure about with Jacoby Walter and the guys that we just drafted, is that they're coming into a situation that is good for them. This is good, right? This is really good. Ramanan saying, "What is the point of trying to compete for a play-in tournament next season? Obviously, we can't tell our players to tank, but if we trade Yak and Bruce does not indicate the direction we're going." If we trade Jakob, yes, it does indicate what direction we are going. Yes. But we haven't traded Jakob yet, and I'm not seeing a clear direction. And honestly, if the Raptors were interested in being bad, once again, as I mentioned in my previous video, I don't think you draft guys as NBA ready as the rookies they drafted. I think you prioritize something else. And there is a word that I want to introduce to you guys, and it's called panopticism. Panopticism. Okay, panopticism. And I stumbled across a reel with Jalen Brown talking about panopticism, concept I believe popularized by Michael Foucault, and it is really interesting about like I just wanted to throw that out there that I think that you guys should look at it. And Alexander B saying vibes are back from top to bottom. I agree. And it's great. I mean, Jacoby Walter is in Paris right now with Eve Misi, which I think is hilarious. The Raptors posting Eve Misi on their social media account is, I'm just like maybe one day we'll see. Um, John Posadas, I think you knew what you were doing, and I think we all know what you're doing, but that's cool. Um, Structure, consistency, winning culture. Completely agree. The Raptors either need Scotty to become an elite shooter or obtain someone that can be their Kobe, LeBron James. So here's the thing, John. I don't think that that's true at all. I really don't. Vegan Grass saying half our starters are sixth men. Well, are they good sixth men? Are they young sixth men? Because if they're good and they're young, there's always a possibility to get better. Do you know who else was a really great sixth man type player? Derek White, right? I think it's worth thinking about sometimes. You know who else was a really good sixth man type of player? Pascal Siakam. At least when he was drafted, he was like a good sixth man type. I think a lot of people probably after even year 1 or 2 would have projected him as to be more of a sixth man on a championship team. Another guy who's a pretty good sixth man type, um, Danny Green, early in his career. I think that would have been probably the role. But those guys started, for a championship team. You never know. Development over time, everything I'm seeing from Emmanuel quickly. I think the Raptors have really figured this out. They've like really cracked it. Like this concept of like just working, you know what I mean? Just like you think all NBA players care about working equally. You think all NBA players sign a, $175 million contract and just keep working. Uh, If anything, I think Emmanuel Quickly's working even harder. Like again, not really sure why, I would be saying that necessarily, but I think he's going to surprise some people next year with just how much better he's gotten. And I think it's because he cares. I think he cares about his personal excellence. And it's like you brought in people, Kelly Olynyk, Jakob Pertl, that you believe fit into a culture that was disintegrating, right? You brought back Jama. He's an architect of your initial culture, the culture of collaboration, the culture of sharing information, the culture of selflessness, the culture of, doing what's best for your teammates instead of just for yourself. Selfishness is very, very, very difficult. It's like a virus. It spreads throughout your organization. One person does it, nobody checks it, conversations happen, privacy, suddenly there's a lack of trust, right? Guys are like, what's his end game? Why is he doing this? Culture is so easy to erode and so difficult to build back. And that's why I think that as much as it is seemingly abstract and hard to quantify, it is also extremely admirable the job that Darko Rajakovic was able to do for this team last year. And trust me, body language does count. Trust me, these things, they matter. And implementing a new culture is a task in and of itself. And it's going to take a while for teams like the Detroit Pistons and the Washington Wizards and any team really that goes out and tries to lose to rebuild culture, because it's very, very difficult not only to build culture, but also to build culture, positive culture, while losing. You know what I mean? Build positive culture while losing through a multitude of trades. I can't wait to see Darko Rajakovic with a steady roster, because it felt like every single time this team got something going, something stupid happened. A controversy happened. A major injury happened. You know what I mean? They'd won 3 straight, and then Scotty goes down, right? It was I think it was 3 straight and then 1 loss and then Scotty went down or something. There was like positive momentum, right? And I just feel like if you judge this team on, oh, 25 wins, 25th in net rating, if you just use that metric and say, okay, well, how is the 25th team in net rating going to go up to 15th, Rob? What is the jump? What, Garrett Temple, Jacoby Walter? No, I think you just need to look at internal growth, consistency, continuity. I think you need to look at this coaching staff having the second year and not having to juggle. I think in order to understand why last year went so badly, I think you have to understand what a disastrous impact roster turnover has on your win production. There's a reason why I showed you all, like, I mean, another thing that I think, and by the way, this entire, what a NBA champion looks like is going to be part of a bigger video. I wanted to make this more Raptors focused, but I want to make that video. And one of the other things that I want to talk about in that video is how often there's roster continuity throughout the years. How much turnover do you have in the 3 years prior to winning a championship, or do you kind of go with the same core and then swap out 1, 2 pieces? You're not exactly seeing wholesale pieces that are swapping out. Yeah, you can add a Rasheed Wallace, you can add a Ray Allen and a Kevin Garnett. You can add but some things have to remain as a base. As I said, you build the foundation, you fit things on top of the foundation. Building an NBA champion is a lot like building a house in many ways. If there's anyone out there who's in construction or whatever, I think you can attest to this, right? Okay, I'll get to like 2 or 3 more comments and then I'm out because we are past an hour. The LA kid won a championship in Toronto. He decided to go home and kick out the Toronto kid. That's an interesting way of looking at it. I never really thought about it that way. That's cool. Um, Might sound crazy, but Brown and Boucher for Simmons or Simons would be a decent trade if we can get back something else. That's interesting. I did want to actually take a moment to address the Sasha Vezenkov issue because, what had happened was a lot of us, right, had assumed incorrectly or correctly that Sasha Vezenkov was coming here, and because we found pictures of him with Darko Rajakovic, they're both European. We're like, hey, European, you like European, and um, there was a report out of a Greek publication that Sasha Vezenkov would not be reporting to Toronto, that he didn't want to be in Toronto, that he wanted them to waive him, etc. And then, of course, Michael Grange comes out with his tweet and he rebukes that. He says, nope, the Raptors expect him to be in camp. Also, we finally got an answer to how much the Raptors paid for Ulrich Shamshay. Answer, $1 million. Okay, so beyond that, I reached out to somebody that I know who is overseas right now, and he is playing in the EuroLeague. And I thought that he would be more plugged in. He also speaks Greek, which helps, to understand sort of the connection. And he's pretty familiar with Olympiacos. And he said he will come to Olympiacos. Like, this is definitely going to happen. And so that's when I tweeted out that I think that I'm leaning towards Olympiacos. Now, I don't know if he's wrong, but this is just my, sort of interpretation of it, that I believe that he will go to Olympiacos. To understand sort of the leverage that the Raptors have in this moment, is you have to understand that he has 6 million plus 6 point something team option next year, because there is an agreement between NBA and FIBA teams. So, Olympiacos and NBA are under the same sort of umbrella in terms of a FIBA agreement, that he cannot go over and play for Olympiacos or any European club while he's still under contract for Toronto, unless Toronto buys him out, waives him, whatever. The other complication is, if they waive him, he has to clear waivers, which means some other team can pick him up. And so it's very difficult, of course. And yes, so being bought out is complicated. And obviously the Raptors will play hardball because ultimately, right, Prashant saying, what do you think of the Wagner contract? I think it's a no-brainer. Franz Wagner is one of my favorite young players in the league. What do I think of the Cade contract? That, follow us on Twitter and find out what I think about the Cade contract. Yeah, so I think the Raptors have like a lot of leverage here because he can't just sit out a year. He's in his prime. He's nearly 30 years old. Obviously, basketball is great love for him. Sitting out for sitting out for an entire year and collecting $6 million, right? You know, Prashant saying, "Damn, bro, I think they overpaid." He's a 22-year-old who has 15.7 win shares over his first 3 seasons. I think they're going to be fine. He's awesome. And Scotty's awesome too. In fact, here's a fun fact. So Scotty Barnes has 15.9 win shares over the first 3 years, right? Franz has 15.7. They are second and third in win shares for their draft class. Number one is Evan Mobley. Cade Cunningham is 38th in win shares in his draft class. He has 1.1. Nobody seems to think Cade is overpaid. Everyone seems to think Franz and Scotty are overpaid. And that's, I think, the big crime and fundamental misunderstanding of basketball is we don't really do a great job of understanding how wins are accumulated. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if the casual NBA fan thinks Jalen Green is better than Scotty Barnes, but that's okay because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, who probably thought Russell Westbrook was better than Kawhi Leonard, and that's okay. My point is that Sasha Vezenkov does not have a ton of leverage here. He can obviously sit out, but then the Raptors don't have to pay him, so they can make this very ugly, or they can make this very peaceful. I suspect, knowing what the Raptors like to do, they'll try to make this as peaceful as possible. But it is worth noting that any amount you buy him out for is dead cap space on your roster. However, it does open up a roster spot, and the Toronto Raptors will probably do what they did last year, which is they will rotate that roster spot. There's inherently a good thing to be able to waive guys, bring guys in, waive guys. So operating under the luxury tax never puts you at threat to clip the luxury tax. And obviously, the Raptors are not going to play luxury tax, pay the luxury tax this year. And so operating as a team that's 3-4 million under the luxury tax, if you're wondering why they haven't signed Gary Trent Jr. or offered him something or whatever, it's largely probably because if they wanted to bring him back at a reasonable amount, that reasonable amount would be like $8 million. He's not taking it. So I'm curious to see where Gary will end up. I'm curious to see where DeMar will end up. I'm very interested to see how Clay will do in Dallas. But yes, E-Trick saying, can we pay him $0 for the buyout? Yes, yes, you can. You can pay him, nothing. You can just, buy out his contract. But it is also worth noting that the Toronto Raptors probably view Sasha Vezenkov as an asset. Now, obviously, you can, do right by the player and just kind of like void his contract or whatever for one reason or another. I'm sure like there can be something to just clip it off. But right now I'm looking at the Toronto Raptors. I'm like, man, they can still trade this guy. There's nothing to say that you can't trade him. He's an expiring contract. He is a $6 million expiring contract, and there's a team out there probably, and he can be combined very soon, if not right away. So right now you have him plus Boucher. You can get back a 20 million 2-year contract, and then take back a pick, and then they can do the buyout. Why do this for him, right? So yeah, JASPR. So I guess Jasper versus the world. Where do you expect the Raptors to where do you expect the Raptors to be like at the trade deadline? I don't know. I could say they could be 7, 8 games under 500. They could be 12 games under 500. They could be 2 games over 500. I have no idea. I don't have a crystal ball. It depends on whether they make one more trade for a really good player. If they trade for Cam Johnson, I'm projecting playoffs. But if they don't, if they trade for somebody else, if they trade Jakob Poeltl, there's a lot. I cannot make season predictions right now. Al Sem saying rookie of the year, sophomore slump, all star, next year all NBA, all defense team. All defense team is going to be hard as hell. But I will tell you, I do see all NBA for Scotty. If the Raptors have even 38 wins, I think the voters will vote him in largely because of the contract issue. You may not like hearing that, but yes, it's true. I want to thank you all for tuning in to Pensar Basketball Live. I hope that these videos are getting better, that I'm getting better. And I want to thank you guys for all of your support, the super chats, of course, the generous contributions via e-transfer, the Amazon wishlist stuff, but also just the subscriptions. It's really awesome to read these comments. I've been trying to respond to as many of them as possible. But, oh, here we have a clarification. If this is true, Sasha cannot be traded with other players until August 28th. That's interesting. I didn't know that that applies in the off season as well. But as I said, I'm a bit of a CBA dummy, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can as I go. Love the content. Thank you very much. And yeah, the feedback has been awesome. Some of you have like left voice notes via Instagram to talk about the last 3 lives, and I hope that this live was a continuation of that and not a departure from that. I definitely want to get better at this. I don't like fluff. I don't like puff pieces. I want to know that if someone has devoted an hour or an hour and 20 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 9 minutes and 47 seconds to listening to me talk about basketball, that they have walked away with something of substance. So thank you so much. Have a great one. Talk to y'all later. Smash the like on your way out. That'd be awesome. Bye.